Hi, and welcome back to It's Not Rocket Science. I'm going to get that in the middle of the frame. 5 questions over coffee. I'm here today with Adrienne Bellehumeur. Adrienne is an expert on documentation and how to best use that documentation to help grow your business. And she's the author of the 24-hour rule, which is the first real mass market a book which gives advice and guidance on the best use and best practice of documentation to grow your business. So I'm really pleased to have Adrienne here with me on the podcast. Adrienne, welcome to It's Not Rocket Science, 5 questions over coffee.
Thanks so much, Stuart, for having me. This is great.
Well, it's terrific to have you, Adrienne. Let's start by sort of understanding a little bit about the sort of audience that you help, the people that have got problems that you are trying to help them solve those problems.
The clients I work with are, well, I'm in Calgary, Alberta, so we are considered Texas North. That's our nickname. So I work with a lot of oil and gas clients here, but of companies of all sizes, to be honest, whether it's company that is just in the process of going public in Canada or large companies on the US exchange. The bulk of my business is actually running compliance, internal control, financial process work, but I do a lot of other types of using the skill of documentation to solve problems. So, but it's a range of clients, but we have a heavy focus in oil and gas right now.
So tell me, what are the sort of problems that those clients have had, and what have they tried to do to solve the problem that 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 they've not necessarily been that successful with before you get involved with them?
Yeah, well, it's very topical right now, and I hate to give a buzzword cop out response, but doing more with less is a huge theme right now, and I'd say it's almost a universal problem with inflation, interest rates, really changing the game and how companies make decisions. So again, it's talked about a lot right now, but I don't think it's just a buzzword. I would say it's the biggest problem that clients right now are struggling with is how to do more with their staff. First of all, I mean, employee engagement is at a all-time low right now. People are not looking. We are in an age where people are not looking to increase their headcount. In fact, we're looking to decrease headcount pretty much everywhere and just operate with a leaner structure. I have other clients that are maybe in a different category than a more mature business. They are looking to scale or leverage what they're doing, but still not really looking. We're not in an environment of spending a ton of money. So this do more with less theme is massive, whether it's an existing business scaling back, using their people better, using systems better, using knowledge in people's heads better. It just seems like a universal problem. And even business owners that are looking to scale right now with high interest rates, high inflation, people want to do it right without just spending a ton of money throwing money at the problem, which is really not what I'd advise to do either.
And really, one of the great problems that we've found ourselves locked into for a lot of years, isn't it? Is the fact that we don't often document all of the lessons learned and things that have happened in the past and how we do things well enough so that when you do get that turnover of engagement, or when you do need to downsize and you do need to automate things through systems, it's not possible to do that because the knowledge is lost, and the knowledge is lost because it's locked in people's heads. And it's only by sensibly and by, well, I'd like to say with minimal effort, but that's what it is. With minimal effort, getting it into a document which is easy to understand, keep refreshed, keep people sort of up to speed, that a business owner is able to do that. And it is critical to not only growth, but when it comes to that stage of when you need to, as a business owner, start thinking about exit, if it's all locked away in people's heads, you cannot possibly move the business forward.
Yeah, it certainly can hurt your sale price as well. In the event of a sale, even informal documentation can be used to increase your sale price as well. So that's a great point. I mean, any To your audience that's often looking to leverage their business, I mean, just getting things on paper is that's a huge part. Big part of my business too is actually
Yeah.
business point of leverage.
Yeah.
Even even myself, if I'm looking to bring someone new in our team or using an administrator, all of a sudden the stuff that I've done from my own head has to be transferred. I mean, it's very interesting how important documentation becomes even when you expand to just two people doing something. I mean, my advice, I guess, Stuart, what I see in and why I'm so motivated in this area is that most businesses have really knee-jerk reaction to these projects where it's kind of oh, let's just go run and spend a fortune either documenting or fancy systems or almost overkilling the problem as opposed to just consistent habits that are
Yes.
less costly. So that's part of my soapbox I'm getting on and the motivation for my work. I know you want to ask about why we're what companies could do better. Yeah, the knee-jerk reaction of rushing out and spending a fortune either documenting or systems or these fancy knowledge management programs. And then what happens is unfortunately they just get cut. This is cut when the buzzword changes. So I've my whole my entire methodology is about consistent habits that are actually quite inexpensive,
Habits.
quite routine.
Habits are really important with this, aren't
Yeah.
they? If it becomes what it, as you say, it's one of those things where if somebody turns around and says, we need to get our documentation up to date, and everybody rushes around and starts doing it,
Yeah.
and then the fatigue flags, and everybody gets fed up of doing it, and then you get to the point where somebody leaves and is okay, well, let's not worry about that. We'll get on with what we get on with, and then we'll just 2-3 years later, somebody says, all our documentation's out of date. Let's get all our documentation out of date. It just is a cycle. I've seen it 3 or 4 times in businesses that I've been involved with there. We haven't got this, learning and a habit with making it just part of whatever is going on. You just keep a note of the latest thing and record it. A great example of this, I was working with a business recently, and there was a huge amount of effort to get a particular problem solved. And then somebody sort of was looking through the wiki, and they came across an entry which was essentially, I guess the best thing could be described as, oh, this is a bit of a known problem. We ought to solve it and think about solving it at some stage. And I asked the question, well, when did that get written? Well, the date stamp is this date. And I went, so let's get this right. We've just spent nearly $250,000 trying to solve a problem that was known about. Yeah, but we'd all forgotten about it. And I went, didn't anybody think of checking the wiki before we started down this path? And they went, no, we kind of don't really bother too much about it. We just look at it when we're really, really stuck. And it was one of those moments when I thought, the habit of constantly sort of doing documentation has been lost in this organization, and it would have saved a good $250,000.
Yeah.
And we would have been 4 weeks ahead of schedule had we not spent 4 weeks forgetting that there was some documentation and not even bothering to look at it. A horrible experience.
It's very basic skill in some ways. I mean, we assume our workforce knows how to do it correctly. My experience as a business owner and consultant is actually it's the contrary. It's very few people that really understand the mechanics of doing it well, and that's actually why I have so much effort writing and training others and promoting best practices and habits around, because my experience is that it's not as well done or understood as a skill. And it does take work. It's not something like breathing. Not everyone, you're not going to just hire experienced people and they necessarily are great at it.
I'm just making a note of things that I need to remember in the future, Adrienne,
Okay.
to come back to. Listen, you must have some valuable free advice that you could give to the audience listening at the moment. What would that be? And I think there is an interesting download that I can refer to now, which I'll show on screen.
Sure, there's a download here. So my book, I'm gonna do.
Oh yeah!
Wow. Oh, nope. I was going the wrong way in the camera.
Wait, there you go.
It's right here. The 24-hour rule and other secrets for smarter organizations. So it's actually, I don't want to freak out your audience that it's a book on documentation. It's actually a fun read. It's much more aligned with solving business problems. That's actually how I view documentation. It's not just a exercise you put on the shelf. It's really about solving problems. That's what I do for a client, whether a client is going public or you're stuck in a vortex of meetings, or you have Peter's retiring and he built your systems from scratch 15 years ago. I mean, there's so many different scenarios which you apply documentation to. And I truly believe it is just a tool for problem solving, also a set of skills that you carry your entire career and in your life as well. So my book is structured along these 6 steps of capture, structure, present, which is about writing and visualization, communicate, store and leverage, and lead and innovate. And I give tips and skills along each of these 6. So my download will give your audience a bit of a flavor for some of these techniques. And if you're interested in more, certainly check them out in the book. I mean, I would say if I could leave your audience with one very simple technique in documentation, that is no technology required, no fancy education, and they will get their money's worth from joining your this podcast today, is the 24-hour rule. And that is a very simple, it's actually, I believe, the golden rule of documentation is that you have to process, you have to do something with information within 24 hours of either hearing it or even it can be applied to ideas as well. The 24-hour rule is the, again, golden rule of documentation, also a great productivity tip. One of the worst losses of good knowledge, momentum on projects, opportunity comes within 24 hours. We are really good at processing information in 24 hours. But if you really wait past that window, your short-term memory and your energetic connection to that information starts dropping. So I'm sure, Stuart, you've been to meetings. Everyone came out with brilliant ideas and all this, they solve the world. And then they just head out for the weekend and really forget to action anything. Those are very classic examples of how good information, opportunity, momentum gets lost because we don't process it effectively. And my experience is a lot of great information is lost within that 24-hour window. Certainly meetings is a great example, but you can apply it to business. I mean, sales, it's usually when you don't follow up on a sales opportunity or even process it or connect with someone you met at a conference, your likelihood of doing that diminishes actually quite rapidly in 24 hours. So it's a very different take on how documentation is usually so formal and so corporate, but this is a new take of driving better habits will change your documentation across the board in so many different areas of your business.
I like it very much, Adrienne. I really do. I really do. Was there a particular book or experience or course or something which really sort of got you into understanding the value of documentation in an organization?
I actually wrote the book because I thought there was a hole in the market. I'm a CPA. I started. It's a very documentation intensive career. Actually, you do need to, when you're an auditor, or you have to know how to document. And usually you're plunked. And my experience is you're plunked into the work world. People expecting you know how to do it. And I actually remember it really drowning when I worked for a lot of banks and all the just sea of documentation. I remember not actually having a good grasp on it. So I was very motivated to write a book that I think would be helpful, but it would be helpful for people new in their career, but also really all levels. I mean, certainly it's almost it levels the playing field. Really, it's not everyone. Almost, it doesn't matter if you're a senior executive or just starting your career. We could all benefit from some of these best practices. The book actually draws from the worlds of information management, organizational design, which is effectively better process, and productivity, personal productivity. It's kind of a smushing together of these three disciplines. And actually, that intersection is really where this world, I call it dynamic documentation, is defined. I would say, I mean, one big influence is David Allen's Getting Things Done. It is, and he's influenced a lot of people. He really, that productivity component, he's the one who really kicked it off. There's been a lot of great productivity books since then, personal productivity. But his is still kind of the kickoff about just over 20 years ago of that new discipline, which is so needed in today's work world. We do need to teach people how to be more productive.
Absolutely agreed. Look, we're reaching towards the end of the interview, Adrienne, and I really thank you for spending some time with us. But there must be one question that's currently keeping you on the edge of your seat, thinking, why hasn't he asked me about? And so therefore, I'm going to ask you now, what's the question I should have asked you, which I haven't yet? And then obviously you have to answer it, because otherwise we'll all be going away wondering why it is we didn't get a good answer to that question. So what is that one question that I haven't yet asked that you'd like me to?
Oh wow, that's a hard question, Stuart. You can ask me.
I like to leave the hard questions for other people to ask as well as answer, Adrienne. That's my secret of my success.
You can ask me what's my favorite simple framework for documentation. I know it's a nerdy question, and I have lots of you to ask me, but yes.
Please give us that description.
All right, I'll give another simple. This is also very helpful for your audience, and I use it extensively in my training, is that documentation has been traditionally viewed as big D documentation. That means like policies, records, formal, big systems, big initiatives like that. Documentation is equally about little d, everyday disciplines and habits that we talked about, including the 24-hour rule, how we take notes, how we store things regularly, how we can write, how we communicate. To have great documentation, you need to balance big D and little d. You can implement the fanciest sales system in the world, but if your sales team doesn't have the habit of recording sales prospects, it's not going to fly. So I'm a huge believer. My very simple framework is that you basically have to keep the two in balance, big D and little d, to have very successful initiatives, projects, and organizations as well. So I'll just leave with that last little framework, easy framework for your audience.
Adrienne, I happen to love that, and it reminds me. I'm just going to give a very real example. I led one business that was currently undergoing a huge amount of trouble. The problems were myriad, but one of the major problems I had to solve was the fact that their cash flow was poor, and the one of the keys to solving their cash flow was to discover that these salespeople captured most of their sales on bits of paper and then uploaded them to the computer system when they got back into the office. And they were traveling, so they would have what I eventually came to call briefcase time. That was orders that were ready, that customers wanted to pay for, in a briefcase for 1, 2, or possibly even 3 weeks, by which time the customer had even forgotten they'd made the order and then would cancel it when they saw it come through on an email, because they thought it was no longer an order or it was a duplicate. And that was one of the major problems that business had. And all we had to do was get them to upload it on a slightly more regular basis than leave it in their briefcase for 3 weeks. And the 24-hour rule became an absolutely critical rule for us. All orders from paper into system in proper documentation so that we actually understood what the order was within 24 hours. You're absolutely right. Big D and little d, absolutely critical to every organization. I love that. I'm going to be I'll steal that from you if that's okay with you.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Talking about big D and little d
you can talk
day long.
Big C, little c. You can use it in different capacities, but they do always have to be in balance. And we talk a lot about big D, so I'm bringing a lot more attention to those little D habits, skills, and disciplines.
Brilliant. Yeah. Adrienne, look, this has been a really fascinating discussion. And I think you've brought documentation to life, which I know is not something which I expected people to be hearing from me, because documentation is not something that most businesses find themselves thinking is a good use of their time, but it's a critical use of their time if they want to grow, critical use of their time if they want to avoid some of the problems you've been saying. Look, we're reaching the end, but if you would like to get onto our newsletter list so that you get to hear about brilliant interviews with people like Adrienne, so that you can participate by asking questions when we're live or by being aware of the recordings when they come out on podcast form on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, here's the link you go to. You go to https://link.thecompleteapproach. That's the complete approach, one word, .co.uk/newsletter. That's link.thecompleteapproach.co.uk/newsletter. Get on that newsletter list, get to hear about great people like Adrienne who are coming up, and about the brilliant sort of things that you'll hear when you see Adrienne's notes coming out, because I'll link to that book and I'll link to her 6 steps, a free download. Adrienne, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us. Really appreciate you coming to us all the way from Calgary. I guess it's still nice and warm there at the moment. I've been to Calgary and I know it can get a little cold, but I guess right at the moment it's still lovely. Adrienne, thank you so much. I'm going to play us out and then we'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you.